Hey, good morning for those that are listening and more importantly watching. Jasil is not doing drugs, nor has she gotten hit in the
Seriously?
face by me.
Okay. It's not
Um,
that serious.
she has two pink eyes
Wow.
and she's looking.
My eyes are not even black and blue. Like, I don't look like I got hit. My eyes are swollen, but I don't look like I got hit.
Please go watch this
Yes.
and just be able to see what I see. It's so beautiful. Every morning I wake up to this and I'm like, this is the woman I married, and I accept and love
Let's
all of her.
throw your hot coffee on you.
So I just was poking fun. How you doing today, baby?
Great. That's such a lovely intro.
It's unpredictable. That's the most important thing about
Tomorrow
it.
is gonna be you next week.
All right, that coffee's strong, and we're ready to go. For
I'm
those
ready.
for those that have been wondering where we're at,
We should possibly turn off that washing machine. That sounds like a motor gone loose back there. Washing machine is very loud on its spin cycle. There we go.
let me take my glasses off. I don't need
Are
them
you
anymore.
ready?
I was prepared to go and dive into a different topic today, and Jasil also gave me a good idea
A
by
chapter has been closed.
chapter's been closed physically,
Yeah,
because I'm still dealing with, which I don't have an issue with, but I'm working through the paperwork side of closing our business.
in 2019, we opened up a restaurant in Virginia Beach,
So let's dive into that a little bit.
and now it has finally been closed. Well, we turned in the physical space, which we still had 2 years left on it on the contract with our landlord, but we were able to settle and close the space out. So that's good. And the restaurant itself has been closed for about what, 7 months now? 8, something like that. Alex's phone is never prepared for the podcast. Oh.
Man. So yeah, so we opened the business in 2019. I'm gonna do a quick version of this because I want to just get it out there. I opened the business for financial reasons. I wanted to make more money.
Well, in
And
his head, it was passive income, and
passive income, yes.
I was like, passive income, you don't really work at it. It's income that's just coming in. And I was like, that's the word passive. But in his head, this was passive income, and I was like, this is not passive income. It's a secondary
Well,
income,
we didn't know at first. We
but
didn't
it
we
was.
didn't know what we were getting into.
Well, no, but you thought it was passive. I knew it wasn't going to be passive, but I was like, it is another income, but it's not going to be passive income.
Yeah.
But
So
that's where you and I totally viewed it differently. Like, I knew one of us was going to have to bust our ass on it, meaning me, because he already had a full-time job. So,
yeah. So that closed, and that's shed a lot of weight, right? That I was in there all last week selling things and cleaning the space and just reminiscing of a gambit of emotions. It went from happiness, it went from sadness, it went from anger, it went from a joy. It was very joyful at the end, and because I ended the whole week by taking a video of the space, and I'm walking through, and instead of seeing a failed business or a business that didn't work out, I saw misalignment. I saw.
and it wasn't that the business didn't work out. The business itself was doing great. It's just we both reached a point where we realized that's not what we wanted to do. So the effort wasn't there. We weren't putting in the time and the dedication that it needed to continue it, like running it successfully. And if anybody has worked in the restaurant industry, it's been around it, it never stops. It has to be a well-oiled machine that you stay on top of all the time. Like, there is no backing down, backing off, and like, oh, it's gonna run itself. Like, that just doesn't happen. for restaurants. It's a constant doing, it's a constant hiring and training and fixing and changing, and yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, and when we started this, we didn't really know what we were getting into, as I mentioned before. Neither one of us were in the restaurant industry. My first job was a cook at a fast food restaurant, but that was when I was 15 years old, and I cooked. I didn't know anything else aspect of it. So
And my father had a grocery store growing up for like 15 years. I mean, he worked at them my whole life, but he owned his own for about 15 years, I think. And I did work there and I was around it a lot, but it was very small. It was a, 1 to 3 person operation. Like he never had more than like 2 employees, and he mostly worked it himself. So it was nothing like we, during high season, we got around 25 employees. Um, busy season. And then on the low end, we were probably down to like 10 employees. So just a lot more work and revenue and everything. So, like he said, I had never worked in a restaurant in my life before, never been around the restaurant industry like that. My older sister has more experience in that. And it was a rude awakening for me. At the time, I had a 1.5-year-old, 3.5-year-old, and a 5.5-year-old. I put the 2 oldest ones in school. And then the little one, eventually, after 2 weeks, I realized I couldn't work with her either. And I ended up putting her in school too. Um, and I worked it full time for about a year. At which point I was also pregnant. So I hired a manager so I could go home and birth my baby. But it was, it was basically learning along the way how to do this, how to manage it, how to run it, right things, wrong things, um, how to deal with people, and on a different level, that I had never had to before. I have always been the employee, not the employer. And then, yeah, navigating all that, and then then trying to hire managers to be able to do my work. And I realized that the level of expectation from other people just has to dramatically decline when it's not you doing it. Because the truth is, like, you will never care about a business more than you. No one else is going to care as much about your business than you. So having like realistic expectations for my manager of what they could actually accomplish and do, and how I could be in support of that. And quickly after having my baby, I realized that I didn't necessarily want it anymore. And a year after I had my baby, it was January of 2021. Yeah, of 2021. I was like, okay, I'm done. I was like, I don't want it. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to deal with it. I'm done. Like, this is way too much. This is more than I thought. Because a year and a half into it, I was still realizing it was almost the same amount of effort that we were having to put in the beginning, as far as hiring and training and keeping up with everything. And it was a lot. And we didn't need the income. It was more of a supplemental income for us. Um,
yeah, I've learned a lot, and I could dive into many things here. And I want to first highlight that this restaurant, or just being a business owner in general, opened my eyes to a lot of my childhood trauma unconsciously at the time. Didn't know what I was didn't know what I was experiencing. But when I look back at it and I try to process it, especially this last week sitting in the space, was that I didn't know how to handle success at a different level. Financial success, in the sense of, we were making money, and because I've always had the lack of mindset growing up as a kid, I translate that into my adulthood, and I was spending what we were making. And so, in the business mindset, like, I was, we were paying the bills, and that's all I cared about, was making sure the bills were paid, and paying the employees and everything like that. And then I would spend the money on either things for the business or personal things, and so it was, that was a big, as I look back on it, that was a big key for me, is like I didn't know how to handle the financial success that came with the business. And then secondly, like the personal journey with entrepreneurship and the challenges that I've encountered with, you know, like self-worth challenges and other things was a big piece of me, especially like my role as a parent, like our relationship. Um, Sweetberry was a big punch in our relationship, or a big challenge in our relationship. And it was because I wasn't willing or wanting to process that trauma at the time of like taking care of the kids
Yeah.
and showing up in the house and being you know, a I'll just being a contributing partner to the relationship. You know, I was still expecting her, as she was working, to do a lot of the things at home, 99% of the things at home, because I had this belief that my job was the one that was providing the income for our whole family to thrive. And so I've been able to sit on that and reminisce on that all this last week, and just where I've, you know, when you look at it from day to day, sometimes you don't see how much growth you've encountered, but when you're able to like really step back and look from where you were to where you are, you're like, wow, like there's a lot of depth now for me in that. And so I'm very grateful. I think that me saying all this, I'm very grateful for Sweetberry, because it actually showed me a different side of myself that I never saw before. And as challenging it was at the time, it's more rewarding now. You know, I'm out of the Navy, and I thank the business for that, because I would not have taken that step if we didn't have some type of financial income
I mean,
from.
we didn't really have it by the time you got out. It wasn't even that. It was just, I think it gave you a taste of what being out could look like for you, because
Yeah.
technically that didn't help us during your transition out.
Yeah, and many, like, you know, and I say this,
We closed it in September. You got out in June.
yeah, many military members, like a lot of people I know want to get out, but the hesitancy is like the unknown, right? And I, for me, I got to see what it looked like to work for myself, and that gave me a lot of challenge when I was in the military. My last couple of years is because I'm working for people that I don't necessarily agree with and align with, and the mission and everything that we're doing, and then I'm seeing what it could be. And so then I also came to the understanding that that's a misalignment. Like Jasil said, the restaurant industry for me is not a passion, you
I
know.
mean, if you know anything about human design, we're both projectors, and managing a restaurant is definitely not up the projector alley.
Yeah,
Not if you're doing it by yourself and you don't have an entire team to employ to do the daily things and the hard things. And we were I was in there every day busting my ass to keep this place up and running for a long time, and it wasn't enjoyable is what I came down to. I was like, I don't enjoy this. This isn't fun, and I am most definitely cannot do this for the next 5 to 10 years.
well, let's reframe for a second, because I do want to, like, yeah, we learned a lot on the negative side, but positively, like, what come came from this for you, like, when you're able to think about it. And
I mean, that positively I learned that money isn't everything, and that you need to do something that truly makes you happy. Like, just chasing money isn't going to equal happiness, and having more money doesn't equal happiness. So I just came to the conclusion that I need to do what lights me up, not what puts more money in my bank account, because that I will burn out and fizzle out very quickly, which I did.
like a birthday candle at a
Yeah.
3-year-old's birthday party, fizzle out.
Yeah, basically.
Um, yeah, so and by no means, like, this podcast, when we were just talking about it for like 2 minutes before we jumped on, it's we're very grateful because a chapter in our life that we felt like was an anchor here has closed physically. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, we were traveling, and
full-time RV.
and the only reason we came back to Virginia was because we had to finish this out. And what we thought was that we were coming back and it was going to be closed out in a couple of months. And our other plans that we had didn't fall, didn't happen. And we ended up having to stay here longer and longer and
I've
longer
been here
because
for like 5 months now.
yeah, and it's literally all because of the restaurant. It hasn't been for any other reason but the restaurant. We've been anchored here because of it. Trying to close it out, sell everything inside, and there's still some things that we need to handle on the back end. But as far as the physical space, which was a big deal for us, thankfully that's been settled and closed out, and we're ready to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah, I also want to highlight the power of, and a lot of people either like this or don't like it, but the power of manifestation, right? Because I had a hard time accepting that for a long time. And Jasil has been very diligent, and she's been very like supportive and pushing us forward of like, hey, we need to really talk this into existence. We need to manifest this, and she does her own practices, and I started to do that. And being able, now that I look at it, being able to walk away on the terms that we did was a byproduct of that. I didn't have it. I wasn't manifesting a specific number, but I was manifesting a vision to where we were not obligated to anything sweet business related. And so that is that's where we're at. The landlord, we negotiated with the landlord, and we finished out something with the franchisor, and then now we have no ties to.
And another big part of that was like everything inside the space. Like, I mean, I don't know how much more perfect it could get, but one woman who was opening up her own business, or she's been in the process of that for many years, for a couple of years now, ended up buying everything, like almost everything in one shot out of the restaurant. Like, how much more perfect can it get than one person taking like 90% of what we had? And then with that, we were able to settle the debt with the landlord. And it was just literally like full circle. And I was like, how much more perfect can it get than that?
And it brings a lot of gratitude to my heart because, and this is for another podcast, but she, her mission for what she's doing in her restaurant is like beautiful, and it's helping disabled people work. And my alarm again, helping disabled people work. And so like that's the beauty of it. It all comes full circle, and how it's played out has been just great. And now next week we're gonna go to Florida, like we've been wanting to like head away.
I'm still not saying that we are, because it's still like not believable. We've been saying that for 3 months.
Yeah,
we've been saying we're going to Florida for 3 months now. We're like, we're going to Florida next week, and then we extend the campground, and I'm like, okay, so are we going to Florida at the end of this campground stay? Yeah, we are. No, we have to extend again, and we could extend again, and we're like, okay, we're going to Florida. It's like, nope, we're extending again.
Yeah, one of the big reasons we extended this last time was because I was every day until like 11 or 12 o'clock at night was in Sweetberry.
Yeah.
Dang it, I said it. I got to get it out of there. I was in the business closing it up, and so I didn't have any opportunity, or you know what, I'm not going to say that. I didn't prioritize that as being something that I wanted to do that week. So I didn't plan for that. And so we didn't go, but I've been making preparations. I've been in communication with some folks down there, and we're gonna get this big bus going and head down. We've been trying to sell the RV here, and Jasil, did a lovely Google search. That's what Jasil's good for. And she realized that Virginia's not a state to sell RV in. And I'm like, well, why are we here? We need to go to Florida.
Not that it's not
to
a
the
state
sun,
to be
to the beach
to sell it. It's just the top 10 states that sell the most RVs. Virginia doesn't come up as one of them.
So this is our last tie to the United States, is the RV.
Yeah, once we sell the RV, we are out of here.
And this is exciting. So back to, I know we went off a little bit, but back to the business. Is there any closing gratitude or thoughts that you wanted to bring to this?
I mean, you just want to talk about gratitude, but I had a lot of negatives more than gratitude while I was in the business.
All right, well, let's talk about negative.
And I know you want to stick to gratitude, but that was a very dark place for me in our relationship, and I guess valuing myself too. I guess if I had to take a positive way, it's like not to put my value in what someone else thinks of me, because during the entire time that I was working in the restaurant, it was always like what you do doesn't matter, what I do matters. And it's like what you do isn't enough, even though I was working just as many hours as you. But if I try to bring work home, it was like the end of the world. Or you could bring work home and that was okay because it was your work. Like I wasn't supposed to work on weekends. I wasn't supposed to work at home. And I could only work for like the 8 hours that the kids were in school, which was not enough time to fully run a restaurant. And then I had to come home and be a mom to 3 kids while being pregnant and exhausted for being pregnant. And I had to do it all. And it was just a very, like I said, dark moment for like phase of my life because I felt truly alone and I didn't feel supported and I didn't feel like my partner gave a shit about what I did or how I felt. And that, if I had to kind of lead ups to what happened, a year and a half later when I asked for a divorce, like that was a big part of it. Cause I was like, I don't want to be with someone who it doesn't matter what I do, it's like never enough. Like what I do is never enough. And then that was also an awakening for myself is like, well, don't let other people determine your value or what you're worth. Like that's up to you to determine that. And like, don't let those voices in your head kind of thing. And I had to like, metaphorically create a big separation of like what you thought of me of what I thought of myself and not let that affect me.
This is the juice.
It was a division. Like it really was. Like I was like, I need to separate from you and not care about you. And it was kind of like we were living 2 separate lives. And
I do remember, and I do remember that.
yeah, it was
And
like you were over there living that life, and I was over here living this life, and those lives touched sometimes, but they weren't one thing.
ooh, that brought up a lot of anger right there. Not at her. The anger is not at her by any means. But I do remember like everything she's saying, I felt too, but didn't say that. But I also like,
And I remember because of the spending habits, we were living in this really nice place and I loved living there. We lived there for 2 years. And I decided when the second year was up was that we were moving out to this like 800 square foot apartment for a third of the rent that we were paying because the spending habits were so bad and it felt like we were never going to get out of debt. And I was like, how is it that we're making the most money we've ever made? And it's like the bills never finish getting paid. And that year when we moved into that really small apartment, we were able to pay off a lot of the debt. But it was like for me, it was like this constant, like I was pulling this weight constantly, and I was the only one like trying to move the weight. And he was like pulling the weight the other way. And I was just like, I reached a point where I was like, you know what? I don't care anymore. Like, this is how you want to live life. Cool. Let's be broke then. and not worry about finances. Like, who cares about money? I was like, I'm not gonna care about it anymore because it was like such a stressful point in my life of me like, okay, I feel like I'm navigating another child with a credit card right now and I can't stop them. And I was just like, oh well.
I actually read something yesterday that just popped into my mind that like it goes a little bit with this. In the conscious leadership group, it talks about commitment, the difference between commitment and I just went blank. Commitment and the other word, I forgot the other word, but I'm just gonna hit on commitment anyways. So commitment is about being committed to a direction that you're going. And so she's talking about like financial independence and things like that. And now that I sit here and listen to her, I wasn't committed to that, I guess. I was committed more to living a luxurious lifestyle where people thought that we were well off.
Well, in my head, it's always been about the end goal of not working till I'm 60.
Yeah.
So the way I always saw us being able to have that surplus of money is like, hey, we can store it, we can invest it, so we don't have to work forever, or like we can take a year off and change directions and like do all these things. Where he was already committed to, I'm working till I'm dead. And I was just like, okay, but why? Like, why work your ass off till you're 60, 65, and then what, 10 years to live, 20 years to live, and then die. So I was like, I've always like held the future. And then yes, there's a balance of also live in the now and enjoy your life now. Like, not, it wasn't about like save every single penny, like don't spend anything. Like, we still went on vacations, we still went out, we still did a lot of things, but we also had a lot of bad spending habits. Like, we ate out like crazy just because there was a paycheck every 2 weeks, versus like now we eat out.
There was a paycheck every week.
Or yeah.
And I wasn't trying to correct you in a sense of like, oh, you're wrong, but like I remember that we altered Sweetberry's payroll. I did, for where I was getting paid from the Navy on the 1st and the 15th, and Sweetberry was on the 7th and
Okay.
the
Well,
21st. And so
there was a paycheck every week.
Yeah.
And I just, like spending habits, like now that we live in the RV and we've gotten more aligned of how we want to use our money and stuff, like we eat out maybe a couple of times a month.
Yeah.
Versus like before, that was like every other day.
And I didn't have boundaries around that. And like I'll use yesterday as an example, because this is a win for me. It's just still was like, hey, I want a burger. Like, I'm like craving this burger. Little baby wants a little French fries, whatever, whatever the case may be. And in the past, I remember many times where Jasil would just like, she's so hungry, but I think she was just getting a bit like she didn't want to cook and she wanted me to cook or something. She wanted me to be there. And so I would always be like, you know what? I'll go get the food. Like, let's do this. I had no boundaries around that.
Can you open up your app and turn off all your alarms?
For our committed followers, okay, I appreciate that.
I'm turning off your phone since you can't do it. Here. There. It's off. It's not gonna ring again.
But like I would always
he would just say, all right, load up everybody, let's go get food. And yesterday he was just like, I'm cooking. And I was like, I know, I just want you to let you know, like, I'm really craving a juicy burger.
Yeah.
I was like, we don't need to go out and get it. I was like, because honestly, I don't think I could find the burger to even satisfy my craving right now.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just want you to know, like, that is what my body's asking for right now. It's like a really juicy burger.
I want to go back to using, this podcast has always been about like how we've really taken a step forward individually to collectively be better. And what I saw so much that I had so much anger and would attack her a lot is I saw a lot of myself. Like every time she brought work home, I saw myself. And
I mean, that's what it always is, and people don't realize it. Like, anytime you're fighting with your spouse or nitpicking at stuff, it's usually something about your own personality or your own actions that you see in that person that annoys you, because it's a reflection of yourself. And then you're like, damn it, why are they doing that? But you don't realize it in the moment. Like, you're really just seeing yourself.
Yeah. And I didn't have a depth to myself, but I do know that many times I'd be like, I don't like this because I do this. And I didn't know how to, at the time, I didn't know how to figure that out, like to like just have self-inquiry and bring awareness to it and sit with it. And
no, you just say really mean things like, oh, you don't want to spend any time with your kids, you don't want to spend any time with your family. And I'm like, I've literally been a stay-at-home mom. Like, what are you talking about? I was like, I've been a stay-at-home mom, and even while I'm working, I'm still taking care of everything. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I had a lot of there's no excuse. I do know why I said that stuff. Like I had attachment issues, right? Like I remember early on in our relationship that many times Jasil said she was just with me for the kids. And so like I constantly, every time Jasil tried to make money or do something, I always thought it was because she was trying to leave me. And it was an attachment thing. And for the majority of our relationship, I had tied my, for lack of a better term, I mean, my control in our relationship was financially. And I didn't have belief in myself as a man, as a person, to have her want to be in this relationship with anything else. Just financially, it's what I was able to provide her and the kids. And that's one reason why I really want to do this work with men, is because when I go back and I think about all the mean things that I've done or the hurtful things that have impacted our relationship, it's not because I wanted to. It's because I didn't really know how to cope with what I was going through. And I didn't have the tools or the awareness to consciously relate with her, right? Like to be able to really talk about or express myself in a healthy manner. And I'm very fortunate that we're still here and that I was able to come to a deeper understanding of myself to be able to do that. And by no means am I saying, oh, I'm 100% perfect here. No, like there's still times that I struggle and but it's the fact that I know many men that I've talked to that have gone through relationship and not there for their kids, or there's no relationship with their kids because they are struggling. They don't know how to relate, and it's because of just generation after generation of repeating cycles that have been modeled before them. And so, like when I go back to that, I'm not gonna say that I'm a victim here. Now, like I've taken responsibility and realized that what I did was not okay, and I can't change that. And all I can do is be here to hold space when these moments come of her opening up and talking about hard things. Because when she says these things, it's hard for me too to listen because I I feel like that's a different person in a different lifetime.
Yeah, it doesn't even feel like that was what, 2 years ago? Something like that.
That feels like a lifetime ago. And
But I just remember in January of 2021, I got a broker to try to sell the restaurant. And in January 2021, yeah, I got a broker to try to sell the restaurant. And then he was already fighting me on it. Like he didn't want it to happen. He was just like, no, like we need the money, we need the money. And I was like, we really don't need the money. Like you make more than enough money for all our needs. Um, and then a month later was when we found out about Linabelle having a brain tumor. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. Like I'm so done. And he kept, saying that we still needed the restaurant. And I was like, we really don't. And now my daughter needs me at home. Like I'm not doing this. And by March, I told him, I was like, I'm not pulling it off the market. I said, if you pull it off the market, it's yours. Like, don't look at me, don't call me, don't ask me anything. Like, you're running this restaurant full time. I said, because in his head, it only required like 20 hours a week. Like, in his head, if you put in 20 hours, the restaurant was taken care of. And I laughed at him and I said, okay, good luck with that. Like, that's what you want to think. Sure. And he's like, if you have a manager, like, you don't need to put any more time into it. I said, okay, sure. It's like, whatever you think. I said, go, run with it. And after a month of him even like trying to keep up with half of what I did, he was like, this is so much work. And I was like, exactly. This is what I've been trying to tell you this entire time. Like everything I stayed on top of was insane. And I stayed on top of like everything. Or I tried to for the most part. I felt like an octopus trying to juggle a gajillion things with each arm. Um, and then after that, he basically, I don't know, he just like went full on Navy and didn't even care for the restaurant at all. So the restaurant basically was just like floating by itself with its manager and employees, but no true oversight of what was going on for a long time. And, that showed the last few months that there was no oversight. We weren't putting any time, any effort, especially once we started traveling full time. Like it wasn't even on his radar. Like unless they called him and said something was wrong, like he didn't check anything essentially. And I was like, you can't run a business like that. Not a business that requires physical presence, which restaurants very much require physical presence. And not always from the owner, but if the owner's not there, then it has to have a solid group that you trust to run it, but it can't just be ran. And I told him this many times, even a manager, like it's just too much work. Like even when I was there running it, it was just too much work even for me by myself. So when I had managers, it was more of a team effort of then I would take care of everything on the back end while they took care more of the physical things. But there was still a lot of work that I did at home, which is why even in January 2021, like I already had a manager established running it for a while, I still didn't want it because I still was doing a lot, even from home and popping in every now and then and things like that. And that's, I think, a lot of the things that he didn't like realize. I was like, this isn't the Navy. You can't just tell them what to do and go home and think that they're going to do it or hope that they do it. I said, because when you come in the next day and you have angry customers and things are broken, like I can't tell you how many times things broke and nobody told me. And I had to go and see it. And they're like, oh yeah, that's been broken for, 3 days. And I'm like, why hasn't anybody called me? Like, why hasn't anybody told me? Oh, we didn't want to bother you with that. And I'm like, what? Like, if something's broken, I need to know. Like, we need to fix it. And it was always like the same, issues and things going on that I was like, yeah, I can't do this. I was like, this is way too much. But it was a real awakening as far as like where to take your life, like what to do and how to go about like what I really want to shift my focus on for the rest of my life. And one thing is like I don't think I ever want to deal with a physical business ever again in that manner. And as far as working with people, it's not that I don't have people skills, but I'm not a fan of dealing with large groups of people. Like I don't want to employ 10, 20, 30 people. Like that's just not in my heart to or at least like if I were to do it, it's more where people are autonomous, like they know what they have to do and they're doing it, not where I'm having to tell them and like lead them like, oh, this is your job, this is what you must do, kind of thing. Because I just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy telling people what to do and how to do it and all of that. Where I felt like you were a lot better when it came to a lot of those things, but also he came with this Navy mindset of like, you just got to tell people this and that. And I would laugh so many times. I was like, if I tell the employees that, like, they'll just turn around and say I quit and leave and walk out the door. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a very humbling.
you can't do that.
It was a very humbling experience. I when she had said like, "Hey, I'm turning it over. Like, if you pull it off the market, I'm turning. Like, I'm not having anything to do with it." I remember sitting in the car a couple times after work and thinking about it, and like, man, I'm good at my job in the Navy. Like, my sailors are successful. Like, they're developing. They're getting awards. They're getting accolades. People are wanting to be better. Like, I can do this too. Like, like this translates. Like, this is what I do. This is who I am. I'm a leader of people, and it was humbling because it really gave me at that moment a a wake up of reality, and it made me really understand the difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Something that Jasil was just talking about, people being autonomous on
Where they know that they reap their own rewards. Like they're motivated by their own internal purpose, not because you're pushing them to do that thing.
yeah. And so like where I was going with that was that in the Navy, a lot of my leadership style was transactional leadership. And I remember later that year being in a evaluation. You get a evaluation yearly. I was in the midpoint, they call it a midterm eval, and my department head, who was very charismatic, and he wants to be a political figure and things of that nature, but he looked at me and he said, Chief Lang, you need to figure out how to turn from transactional to transformational, because your division, the people that work for you, thrive because there's a transaction that they're going to get, there's a reward, and it's not because they're bought into your vision or to our shared vision. And so as I was, like, let's go back and during this period, I'm like, oh, like, this is all transactional. I'm going to throw a little bit of programs in there, some financial incentives for them to be better, and to really have people take ownership. And the thing was this, I didn't get in there to really see what people wanted, right? Because finances are only a portion of it. There's other things that drive people. And so I didn't do that, but I also did take the Navy mindset, and people quit. People,
I
there was
mean, you did. You started adding bonuses and things like that and all this stuff and like trying to motivate the employees. And the thing is, like, it would only motivate them so far
yeah.
before it was kind of back to the same thing.
So it was a very eye-opening experience leadership wise, that I there was more work for me to be done, right? That a lot of my, and I say this now looking back, a lot of my leadership was from leading from fear, right? Toxic fear and blaming and shaming and guilting. And a lot of times if something happened, who's to blame, right? And then trying to make an example, or all, like when it came to reward, you know, if you don't, if you don't do this, you're not going to get this type of thing. And that was building that mindset of, well, I'm only going to do this if there's some type of reward. I'm only going to take the, I'm being exaggerating, but I'm only going to take the trash out if I get, paid this, and so it was a tough time for me in that sense. And that's why I really shut down and I went back Navy, was because I was failing. I knew I was failing. I felt it, and I saw it every single day through cameras and through looking at sales and looking at people, looking at the spending sheets and all that other stuff. And I'm just like, I need to stick to something that I know how, and like know what I'm
So
doing.
just ignore the business then
Ah,
and go back to your full-time job and
I'm
just
being very honest and open and clear about it.
yeah. So I had to completely detach, and I deleted all the apps from my phone. I never logged into anything again. Every now and then I would say, "Hey, how's it going? Like, how's the business doing?" But as soon as he started getting into issues or into the thick of it, I'm like, "Nope, I don't want to hear it." And he would get upset at me. He's like, "No, I feel like I can't talk to you about the restaurant." And I'm like, "You kind of can't, because I'm kind of not over it." I was like, I still get angry when you talk about
I'm
it.
glad you mentioned it. That was
Because
my next point.
yeah, because I like detached in the sense like I didn't want to know anything about it. But anytime he started talking about it, it would just annoy me and frustrate me, and I would become very angered because I'm like, it's your own fault. I'm like, it's your own fault for thinking that you could take a back seat when you're the one supposed to be driving the bus. And I'm like, you can't just take the back seat and chill. Like, this is your doing. Like, you got to drive it. You got to show them where to go. Like, they don't know what they're doing. And even the managers, like, yes, we had great managers, awesome people, like well-meaning, but at the end of the day, even a manager needs like, okay, this is where we're going, so they know which way to pull the whole team. And if they don't feel supported by the owners, like, why would they put extra effort into anything? Like, they're going to be like, screw this, they don't care, I don't care either, I'm
Yeah.
going to do the bare minimum to keep my job, but that's about it.
I was venting. I just was wanting to vent, and oftentimes it came into me getting attacked, and it was so frustrating. And I didn't understand it, but it was so frustrating, and I closed down even more, and more resentment came, and it was a very unhealthy point in our relationship. But now that looking at it, it's where there's lows, then like
Then it grows.
then it grows, right? The lows and it grows. So we got to really see that part, and now we're in a different place. And I think for me, looking forward or leaning forward into this is, I have a understanding of like relationships now, and that like when we were getting into this business partnership, I didn't see it as a relationship, because they were in two different states, and like I wasn't like, oh, this is a big piece, like our values need to align, or like we have
Yeah.
to be on the same page. I was just like, it's money, let's do it, let's
Yeah, and
make
that was
money.
like one thing I mentioned to him before our doors even opened. I remember telling him I already had some issues with the franchisor, and I told him, I said, look, I don't know moving forward how this is going to work, because this guy clearly is like completely different than us, and the way he operates, the way he is, like, he seemed shady, like I didn't know what to believe and what was his intentions with a lot of things. And I was like, I don't trust him. And I was like, I don't want to be in business with someone I don't trust. But then it was kind of like the mindset, like, oh, well, this is our restaurant, so we can just move forward and, make whatever we make of it, because this is our restaurant. But at the end of the day, it did affect us. It came back to, affect us and affect our restaurant regardless, because we were under a franchise. And those were the things that, like the lessons learned is like, don't ever go into business with someone you don't trust.
Or
Someone
even
that
like when you have they talk about full body, yes, if there's
yeah,
some type of hesitation, like there was hesitation, I did have
yeah.
hesitation.
Hold on. Our kids are doing something.
And like a lot of times in society, we're like, we we start to lose sight of our own intuition and our own like guidance system. And if you feel that in your body, like speak up about it. I did feel it, but I also like my thirst for money was stronger. And I really believed the message that was put to me, that was communicated to me through this relationship. And everything, the red signs, the flags that were coming up, I was ignoring. And Jasil, like I remember many times she's like, this doesn't seem right. And I'm like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. And we are fine now. But it was a lot of challenges. You know,
Yeah, I also, believe that it was meant to happen the way it happened because the lessons that we learned are foundational to our future, and how we're going to conduct ourselves from here on forward. And rather learn it in your 20s than in your 50s, So I was like, right on. Like big lessons learned in our 20s for us. And now we get to move forward knowing these things and being clear on who we are and how we want to work with people, how we want to conduct ourselves when it comes to business matters. There was a lot of lessons learned even on the back end of that had nothing to do with the restaurant, but our own friends. And, at what point do you believe a person, or at what point do you just say, okay, I'll take your word for it? Like all of this it was big, lessons for both of us of how to conduct ourselves when it comes to business, when it comes to money, when it comes to relationships, and clear lines between where are we talking as friends and where are we talking as business partners. It's not that your friends can't be your business partners, but there has to be clear lines of where we are with that too.
Yeah, and I also like a couple things that you took away in a positive, like moving forward. Like for me, is I do want to work with Jasil, but it has to be in a manner where we're impacting lives in a different way. Like we're like changing the world in a different way, and also understanding that my strengths like play into my strengths and allow her to lead in my weaknesses, right? And I say that because the financial aspect was and I still am working on as a challenge for me. And so like she's very strong there, and and allowing her to lead. And I was so resistant on that, right? Because I was just,
I mean, if I was leading, we wouldn't have to work for the next 10 years.
and then
I gave you a year and a half of no.
and then the second thing is like I'm grateful because this not being the sole painful moment in my life, but it was a pretty painful time, and it's transformed into my power. It's transformed into my purpose, like in the power of aligning with your purpose. Like I had a hard time getting into that restaurant, and doing what I do now is it just comes second nature to me. It
Yeah.
just, and it's easeful.
And that's what I also like brought that point up to him. I was like, you don't even like being in there. Like you don't even like working. Like, why do you want to keep it? And it was really because of the money. That was it. And I was like, I don't enjoy being in there. Like, I know that now. And he was like, like we need the money. We need the money. And I'm like, okay, keep.
Yeah, and then the last thing is just really following your intuition, right? Like when you start to get those red flags, really look into them and ask,
Well, listen to the first red flag.
listen to the first red flag, but and sit with it, right? Yeah, it's
And if you know anything about human design or look into it, your authority and your type also says a lot about the way you should interact with people, with life, with everything. And like both of us being projectors, we're meant to be guides. And what's said about projectors is that we don't have a lot of energy, right? Like that's the generators. And it's not that we don't have a lot of energy, is that we only have energy for the things meant for us. Where generators can tap into that a little easier than projectors. And also we're both emotional authority projectors, which means that we have waves. We need to wait before making decisions and allow to feel the highs and the lows of our emotional wave before coming to a decision. Where some people, like in splenic authority, they just know in the moment, and the longer the wait, the cloudier it gets for them. So it's the opposite of us. But for us, it's like knowing now to sit on a decision, like whenever big things come, it's like, okay, we're not making a decision right now. Like we're gonna give it at least 24 hours or two days before we're gonna come to this decision. And that's for bigger things, obviously. And feeling that like in your body, like not with the mind, with the body. Feeling that like, okay, this feels like a whole body yes. And as soon as there's some doubt, like don't be like, oh no, it's nothing. Like if it's in your body, it's speaking to you for a reason, and listen to that.
Yeah, so that's our business adventure
Yeah.
that's closed,
We're done in Virginia.
and we're going on to the next chapter, and we're excited to grow together, to grow individually, to grow as a family, to grow in our vision.
Sell this RV.
Yeah. So till next time.
See ya.